This is a land where it is said time itself began. A land whose spectacular folds and crevices were the first to appear on the surface of the earth. This is a land of soaring giants. A land where magnificent forests of tall timber produce some of the finest hardwood in the world. This is a land of mineral wealth, a land where vast underground resources have created riches beyond belief. But most of all, this is a land of delicate beauty, a land where an endless coastline is sprinkled with exquisite bays and secluded sandy coves. A land where ancient creatures thrive in an untouched wilderness. A land where each year a miracle blooming of wildflowers transforms arid desert into wondrous carpets of shimmering colour. This land, Western Australia, Australia's Wildflower State. The state of Western Australia is huge, its landmass covering almost 1/3 of the Australian continent. To its early settlers, its sheer size was daunting. They saw its dry, inhospitable interior as nothing more than a useless wasteland, and were content to settle and farm the more fertile coastal regions. Although the pastoral industry supported the fledgling colony of Western Australia through the 19th century, it was the discovery of vast deposits of gold that set the state on its road to prosperity. One of the first major gold strikes was at Marble Bar in the Pilbara. The settlers' apprehension of the harsh outback was overcome by the lure of gold, and soon this legendary town was bustling with hopeful prospectors. The town's boom times were short-lived, however, when a find in 1892 at Coolgardie saw miners flock to the more lucrative southern fields. Within a few short years, Coolgardie's population exceeded 15,000, and with the arrival of the railway from Perth in 1896, the town's future seemed assured as the flourishing centre of mining activities. But a further discovery of gold just 39 kilometres east of the town led to a gold rush that was staggering in size and firmly established the new township of Kalgoorlie as capital of the Golden West. Today, overlooking streets that once pulsed with horse and dray, Kalgoorlie's fine turn-of-the-century buildings reflect the opulence of a time that saw grand Edwardian structures rise from the dusty, sun-parched plains. Built upon the courage and determination of miners, Kalgoorlie is today the thriving hub of Australia's largest gold-producing region. Over 100 years after prospector Paddy Hannon turned the first sod of earth, Kalgoorlie's Golden Mile, considered to be the richest square mile of earth in the world, still continues to produce the precious metal. The Super Pit, a huge open-cut mine sited on the original diggings, is expected to reach a depth of 500 metres, 2 kilometres wide and almost 5 kilometres in length. Pulsating with the frenzied activities of today's modern machinery, this mine is a far cry from the rabbit warren-like tunnels of the old diggings. The toil and hardship miners endured on the early diggings have been vividly brought to life at Hannon's North Tourist Mine. This is Kalgoorlie as it was when fortune seekers from around the world flocked to the newly discovered fields. Rough ironclad shacks, hessian and canvas shanties, and dwellings made from packing cases bring to life the colourful history of the first settlement that sprang up around Paddy Hannon's camp.
28, 68.
Many a fortune was made on the goldfields, only to be lost on the toss of a couple of pennies in a game unique to Australia. Enclosed in rusty corrugated iron, much as it was over 100 years ago, Kalgoorlie's famed two-up school still resounds to the cheers of winners and the woes of losers as past meets present in friendly rivalry. Set in the bush just out of town, the two-up school retains the colourful atmosphere and character of the old rip-roaring days of life on the goldfields. The vast expanse of the goldfields was a foreboding place for those who went in search of fortune. Across an arid landscape of rust-brown plains and mulga scrub, many towns vital to the miners' survival blossomed. Each town had its own distinctive character, each town contributing in its own way to the colourful history of mining. Sadly, most have disappeared. Their only legacy, the scattered ruins of shattered dreams. Those that did survive the boom and bust times still retain the romance and atmosphere of the golden years. Norseman, southern gateway to the goldfields, had unusual beginnings. Legend has it that a sturdy little steed named Norseman unearthed a piece of golden reef with his hoof. His discovery eventually led to a huge gold find. Today he still gazes down the main street of the town that bears his name. From its humble beginnings, Norseman is one of the few remaining towns enjoying a resurgence in gold mining. Much further north, Mount Magnet, the oldest surviving gold settlement in Western Australia, is another of the early towns that has withstood the fluctuating fortunes of mining. Mount Magnet was proclaimed a town soon after gold was discovered in 1891. pastoralists, however, had colonised the region 20 years earlier, and it was the sheep and cattle industry that ensured the town's survival when a slump in gold prices caused a downturn in mining. Today, like Norseman, modern technology has come to the aid of the mining industry, and the Morning Star mine, just out of town, is once again a major producer. The mining revival has breathed new life into another of the northern towns, which for almost half a century struggled to stay alive. Because of its central location, Meekatharra has become the service centre for many mining companies and mineral exploration groups. Meekatharra is also base for the region's Royal Flying Doctor Service, which provides a mantle of safety for those who still venture into unknown territory. Through drought and despair, through boom and bust, these struggling towns have survived to provide the much-needed infrastructure that allows mining to continue in such desolate outback regions. In stark contrast to its almost rainless centre, the cooler climate in the state's extreme south supports more than 172,000 coastal hectares of magnificent karri forests. Here in the heart of karri country can be found one of the world's finest hardwoods. Prized for its durable, handsome timber, the karri, unique to Australia, is the third largest tree in the world, taking 200 to 300 years to reach its full height. For those brave enough to scale these giants, the Dale Evans bicentennial tree in Warren National Park is at 68 metres, the tallest of 3 climbing trees. Although these seemingly impenetrable forests were the bane of early settlers, their commercial value was soon realised when the first trees were felled in the early 19th century for use as railway sleepers on the Trans-Australian Railway. For more than a century, Pemberton, tucked away amongst the forest greenery, has milled the abundant supply of hardwood. The town still retains the character of those bustling timber times when the hiss of steam and the shrill cry of the sawmill whistle roused workers from their weatherboard cottages. Standing at the end of the town's main street, the largest hardwood mill in the southern hemisphere still processes the fine timber. Careful forest management and conservation techniques have ensured a constant supply of wood to the mill, while still preserving the splendid forests. Rattling its way along the original state sawmill line, the Pemberton tramway takes passengers on an unforgettable journey deep into the dappled world of the Karri Kingdom. Rich in plant and animal life, nearly half of these forests are included in conservation reserves. Rambling through the peaceful stillness, rivers and streams are engulfed by an extraordinary assortment of tangled woodlands. And adding a magic touch to the tranquil splendour, cascading water tumbling over rocky creek beds create exquisite forest alcoves that are just simply too irresistible to ignore. From Pemberton, the Karri forests march majestically 150 kilometres to the coastal resort of Walpole. Nestling on the shores of Walpole Inlet, this lovely holiday village is surrounded by the magnificent timbers of the Walpole Nornalup National Park. Covering more than 18,000 hectares, the park boasts spectacular scenery, none more stunning than the Valley of the Giants, a grove of rare eucalypts known as tingle trees. Winding through the timbered canopy, a 600-metre treetop walkway provides a unique glimpse of this remarkable thicket of trees. Below, a boardwalk meanders through the quiet stillness of an ancient empire. An empire created long ago, yet still preserved here for all to enjoy. And sheltering under the timber canopy, an endless collection of delicate plants. East of the coastal forests, the safe anchorage of King George Sound made it a natural choice for the brig Amity to set ashore the state's first settlers. Nestling on the shores of Princess Royal Harbour, Albany was to become Western Australia's first permanent settlement. History has left its mark on the town. Its old stone buildings, reminiscent of the time when it was a major international port of the 19th century. Today, Albany is the principal town of the south coast, servicing a hinterland of rich farms and fertile valleys that produce wheat and wool. Albany is also blessed with a spectacular coastline. Quiet, secluded beaches, shelter in watery alcoves, and heath-covered granite cliffs plunge into the swells of the Southern Ocean. These waters were once home to Albany's oldest industry, whaling. At its peak, in 1845, up to 300 ships and numerous whaling stations operated along the southern coast. On the tip of Flinders Peninsula, overlooking King George Sound, Australia's last whaling station is now Whale World, a museum preserving the relics of the country's whaling past. The Cheney's Beach Whaling Company operated 3 ships from here quite successfully for 26 years. The station processed 14,600 sperm whales before dwindling whale numbers, plummeting whale oil prices, and rising operational costs led to the station's demise. Its closure in November 1978 brought to an end Australia's colourful whaling era. Stretching ever eastward, the south coast's spectacular vistas culminate around Esperance, a smorgasbord of secluded bays with snow-white beaches can be found mere minutes from the town's doorstep. Offshore, a chain of more than 100 islands form the magnificent Rocher Archipelago. Most of these islands have never been inhabited. Some boast splendid cliffs and rocky slopes, covered with low scrub-like vegetation. Others are no more than huge rocks. The waters abound with marine life. Playful dolphins, colonies of Australian sea lions and New Zealand fur seals relish the sanctuary of this remarkable marine reserve. The Esperance region has more than 250 kilometres of coastline protected by national parks. Jutting into the Rocher Archipelago, Cape Le Grand National Park preserves an undulating heath-covered sand plain which hugs attractive coves and sandy inlets. Massive granite rock forms dramatic peaks, while the sandy plains support a rich variety of animal and plant life. In spring, the land is covered in an exquisite floral arrangement that only the deft hand of nature could create. These delicate blooms are typical of those found in the coastal parks of the south. Nature's hand has been busy too along the state's western coastline. 29 kilometres south of Cervantes, the eerie moonscape vista of the Pinnacles rise from the yellow sands of Nambung National Park. First sighted from the sea by Dutch sailors in the 16th century, these stone pillar-like structures were thought to be the ruins of an ancient city. Their origins, however, have long been the subject of much debate. It's believed by most geologists that they were formed when chemicals carried by rainwater seeped deep into the sand. Over the millennia, these chemicals formed rock-hard pipes, which were finally exposed when relentless coastal winds blew away the sands, creating the Pinnacles, a unique graveyard of nature. Principal city of the west coast and base for the state's largest lobster fishing fleet is Geraldton. Centre for the Midwest's vast mining, fishing and agricultural industries, this bustling regional city is one of the state's most popular winter holiday resorts, boasting an average 8 hours sunshine a day. From Geraldton, the northwest coast highway immerses the avid traveller in a profusion of scenic delights to be found along the west coast. Digging deep into the limestone bluffs, the seas have chiselled an interesting mosaic of shape and colour, creating the exhilarating coastal vistas of Kalbarri National Park. Throughout the 186,000-hectare park, many walking trails meander through 80 kilometres of beautiful craggy gorges, fashioned by the timeless procession of the Murchison River as it sliced through the 400-million-year-old Tumblagooda sandstone plateau. It's not hard to find a cosy fishing village or two along this part of Western Australia's coast. Overlooking the waters of Shark Bay, Denham is the Australian continent's most westerly town. Originally a major pearling centre with a mixed population of 2,500 Malays, Chinese and Europeans, Denham is today surrounded by the natural wonders of the Shark Bay region. With magnificent stretches of coastal wilderness and stunning natural beauty, this region has been recognised internationally as a World Heritage Area. Placed on the World Heritage List in 1991, Shark Bay is only one of a handful of places in the world that satisfies all criteria for listing. Shells thriving in the salty bay waters have bred in their millions, creating a unique stretch of beach, consisting of countless millions of small white shells in places up to 10 metres deep. Shell Beach stretches for 110 kilometres around Larimar Bight. Shark Bay is an area of endless geological wonders. Looking more like insignificant lumps of black rock, the stromatolites at Hamlin Pool are in fact a living link with the Earth's evolutionary history. The living microbes building the stromatolites are similar to those found in rock dated at 3.5 billion years, the earliest record of life on Earth. A visit to the remarkable Shark Bay region is not complete without an encounter with the ever-friendly dolphins of Monkey Mire. Since the early 1960s, when fishermen began feeding a dolphin they nicknamed Old Charlie from the side of a boat, wild bottlenose dolphins have been swimming into the beach to meet and mingle with people. Today, these lovable creatures are still regular visitors, arriving early each morning for the breakfast handout. "550 leisurely road kilometres north, the sea greets the sand at Coral Bay. Boasting just one small hotel, a shopping centre and several caravan parks, This idyllic holiday village is the perfect choice for those who love the sea. But the beauty surrounding Coral Bay goes beyond its sparkling white beaches. Just 50 metres from shore is one of nature's most beautiful contributions to Western Australia's coastline, the Ningaloo Reef. Sheltering in the warm blue waters of the Ningaloo Marine Park, this is one of only 2 coral reef systems in the world that occurs on the western side of a continent. Intricate patterns of shape and colour, formed by more than 220 species of coral, create Ningaloo's untouched beauty. Built up over thousands of years, these delicate coral formations are the skeletons of countless millions of tiny sea creatures called polyps. More than 500 species of fish have been recorded amongst the reef's incredible amount of marine life. Stretching 269 kilometres down the western side of the Exmouth Peninsula, Ningaloo Reef creates a natural calm water barrier for many beaches that form the western boundary of Cape Range National Park. Rising 350 metres from the coastal plain, Cape Range is the only elevated limestone range on the northwest coast. Once the home of Aboriginal people, this landmass has witnessed many changes, from pastoral activities to mineral and oil exploration. The eastern side of the range is largely inaccessible, but for 2 roads cut by gas and mineral exploration teams in the 1950s. Winding its way steeply up the eastern scarp, the Charles Knife Canyon Road leads to an endless variety of deep valleys and rugged stony outcrops. Another of the exploration tracks, Shothole Canyon Road, weaves its way through gorges where erosion has exposed the multicoloured inner cores of sheer rock walls. Finally, the rugged stone country of Cape Range descends to the arid coastal plains and drifting sand dunes that edge the turquoise waters at the tip of the Northwest Cape. Covering the northwest corner of the state is an area rich in mineral wealth and awesome beauty. This is Western Australia's Pilbara, a landform so old it even predates human history by thousands of millions of years. At its heart, the Hamersley Ranges, the state's highest landmass, rises from the Pilbara's distinctive spinifex-covered plains. Within its massive folds, Karijini National Park watches over 600,000 hectares of land, as old as time itself. Sprung from the bed of an ancient sea 3,000 million years ago, the Pilbara Block, known by geologists as Yilgarn, was one of the first landforms to appear on Earth. Over time, nature took on the Herculean task of sculpturing the land. Rivers and streams slice deep into the scarp, dissecting Karijini with a profusion of deep ravines and gorges. In the splendor of these fissures is the scenic grandeur of another time. Here, woven in the colourful tapestry of rock, is 2 billion years of evolutionary history. There seems no end to the beauty Mother Nature has bestowed on the Pilbara. Surrounded by semi-arid desert, the oasis in Millstream Chichester National Park is a living relic from the prehistoric rainforests that once covered most of the Australian continent. Having survived thousands of years of climatic change, the oasis contains many varieties of water-loving plants. Fed by an enormous underground aquifer, estimated to hold 1.7 billion cubic metres of water, Millstream spills into the Fortescue River, creating permanent pools of life-sustaining water, even in the driest of dry seasons. Amongst the splendour of the Pilbara's ancient beauty is its massive resource developments. Since the early 1960s, miners have literally moved mountains to extract the region's iron-rich ore. Huge open-pit mines, crawling with mechanical monsters, pocket the landscape. With over 40% of Western Australia's mineral wealth contained within the Pilbara region, mining here is on a colossal scale. Industrial development in this remote corner of the state was not without its problems. Hundreds of kilometres of rail lines had to be constructed over land that was a track layer's nightmare. Gliding along the slender ribbons of steel, trains up to 3 kilometres long carry more than 28,000 tonnes of iron-rich ore. Their destination, the massive loading facilities of the Pilbara's coastal towns and ports. Originally a pearling centre of the 1860s, Port Hedland has become Australia's largest port for export tonnage. Surrounding the town, 6,500 hectares of natural salt pans produce more than 2 million tonnes of salt. Another of the Pilbara's resources shipped from this huge port. The mining boom brought with it some of the state's more recent towns. Karratha was established by Hamersley Iron in the mid-1960s to service the nearby port of Dampier. Overlooking the waters of the Dampier archipelago, the port's 5 dock facilities ship more than 40 million tonnes of iron ore a year. Often described as the industrial engine room of Australia, the Pilbara's resources seem never-ending. Standing on the Burrup Peninsula is the processing plant of Australia's largest single resource development, the North West Shelf Gas Project. This plant, the most technologically advanced in the world, processes more than 6 million tonnes of liquefied natural gas annually. But even here, as with most of the Pilbara, the monuments to modern man's achievements are engulfed by the relics of its distant past. 20,000 years ago, ancient craftsmen from another culture chiseled their story in the red iron rocks. More than 10,000 pieces of rock art are scattered throughout these hills, establishing the Pilbara's Burrup Peninsula as the most prolific Aboriginal art location in the world. Lying between the Pilbara and the forested coastline to the north is the Kimberley, the most remote, least developed corner of the Australian continent. Access to this sparsely populated region is often difficult. Rugged topography and fierce climate has enabled this wilderness area to remain virtually unchanged for thousands of years. Often described as a vast natural open-range zoo, the Kimberley's plants and animals evolved from a time 50 million years ago when Australia was once part of the supercontinent Gondwanaland. In the dry season, reptiles from another age laze around isolated pools along sandy riverbeds, or shelter under the rocky overhangs of ancient limestone walls. These walls were once part of an enormous coral reef formed 350 million years ago on the bed of a tropical sea that once covered most of the Kimberley. Access to this wild, sparsely populated region is often difficult. The reward for those who achieve it is the exotic and haunting beauty of a primitive land that in places still remains little known even today. Inundated by the torrential downpour of monsoonal rains in the wet, the hot, relentless sun of the dry transforms raging rivers and streams into pools of tranquil solitude. Hundreds of lush, emerald green oases shelter under the steep cliffs of spectacular gorges. Covering an area 3 times the size of England, the Kimberley encompasses an astonishing landmass. Between the semi-tropical coastal forest and the arid deserts to the south is a 350 million-year-old conglomerate of weathered sandstone. Etched from the land over thousands of years by the torrential downpours of the monsoonal rains, the Bungle Bungles remained virtually unknown till as recently as 1982. The hundreds of dome-shaped hills add another element of intrigue to this strangely beautiful country. The settling of the Kimberley has been synonymous with the growth of the cattle industry. Cattlemen have been the most persistent settlers, combating heat, humidity, and torrential rains to establish a thriving cattle industry. These animals, ideally suited to the rugged terrain, roam over some of the largest cattle stations in the world. Although the Kimberley has resisted most of man's attempts to tame it, one of the greatest achievements was the damming of the Ord River in 1963. Holding 18 times the volume of Sydney Harbour, Lake Argyle became the major storage reservoir for the Ord River irrigation scheme. Today, more than 10,000 hectares of previously useless land has been turned into crop pastures, growing a wide variety of produce destined for markets both in Australia and overseas. Besides grazing and agriculture, the Kimberley has in recent years given up other treasures. Diamonds have been found in Australia for more than 100 years, but not in such abundance as that produced by the Argyle Diamond Mine. The mine's yield is more than 35 million carats per year, at least 5 times that of the world average, making the Argyle mine the world's largest producer. Another of the Kimberley's treasures can be found on its western coast. Established in the 1880s, Broome, one of the region's oldest towns, was once the pearling capital of the world. In the early 1900s, 400 luggers, crewed by a mix of Malays, Japanese and Europeans, sailed the shark-infested waters off Broome in search of the elusive pearl shell. Although the frenzied days of pearling have long disappeared, the town still retains the colourful character of its multicultural past. But even amongst the Asiatic charm of this unique northwest seaport, the Kimberley's ancient beauty is never far away. Protected from the world by ocean and isolated from the rest of Australia by vast deserts, Western Australia's landscape has been left to evolve undisturbed for thousands of years. Relishing this isolation, a myriad of native plants has adapted to the state's fierce climate changes. In spring, more than 7,000 species blossom, covering this vast state in an unbelievable kaleidoscope of colour. Even the seemingly lifeless deserts burst into bloom after the soaking rains of winter. Spectacular fields of everlasting daisies fringe the desert regions. Even the animals enjoy the onset of spring. The colour, shape and diversity of this natural floral garden is overwhelming. Western Australia's coastal region doesn't escape the onslaught of colour. Its coastal heathlands has one of the most diverse floral communities in the world. And amongst the stunning floral arrangements, the extraordinary kangaroo paw, the state's floral emblem. Each year, visitors the world over are drawn to the compelling floral beauty of Australia's Wildflower State.